Ethan Marshall didn't hear the rain when he found his wife's sketchbook on the blood-spattered cabin floor. Only the sound of his own breathing, sharp and broken, echoing in the hollow space where hope used to live. Clara's drawings, frantic and smeared, lay scattered around him like pieces of a mind unraveling. The faceless man, the slashed windows, her shaking handwriting begging someone, begging him to believe her. But it was the last page that crushed him. A charcoal portrait of herself, eyes hollow, lips trembling, a shadow gripping her wrist. Underneath, in fading pencil, "I can't run anymore." Ethan's knees buckled. He pressed the page to his chest as the weight of his failure closed around his throat. He had signed their divorce papers 3 days earlier. Now he wasn't sure if Clara was missing or already gone. And he knew, whatever happened next, there was no going back. Rain had not stopped for 3 days in Seattle, and the city looked like it was sinking into its own reflection. Ethan Marshall stepped out of the King County Courthouse with the numbness of a man who had just walked through fire and felt nothing. The divorce papers were still warm from the printer, tucked inside a thin, government-issued folder that felt too light for something that had taken 4 years of his life to build and tear apart. Clara Bennett was no longer his wife. He repeated the sentence in his mind, expecting some kind of relief, a loosening of the knot that had lived in his chest. But the tightness remained, maybe even grew. Ethan drove through downtown traffic, one hand gripping the wheel, the other running along the edge of his badge resting on the passenger seat. Deputy Marshal. A title he once believed was armor. Lately, it felt like the very thing that had poisoned everything he touched. He hadn't planned to return to the apartment, Clara's apartment now, but something inside him, habit, instinct, masochism, drove him there. He told himself he only needed to pick up a few boxes he left behind, nothing more. The hallway smelled like old carpet and lavender detergent. Clara loved lavender. The thought punched him unexpectedly. The door was still locked, with the code they once shared. He typed it in. The soft beep felt accusatory. Inside, the air felt wrong, too still, too quiet. Clara's apartment had always been a mess of colors, canvases leaning on walls, brushes soaking in jars, the faint smell of turpentine. But the living room was stripped bare. No brushes, no jars. Even the plants she nursed like children were gone. Her laughter, usually echoing off the kitchen tiles, was replaced with silence so heavy it made the walls feel closer. Ethan stepped further in. "Clara." His voice bounced back at him. Nothing. His boots echoed on the hardwood floor as he noticed a draft coming from the studio door at the end of the hallway. It was slightly ajar. He pushed it open and froze. The studio was wrecked. The main canvas, once a portrait she refused to let him see, lay slashed to ribbons. The colors bled across the floor like spilled organs. A stool was knocked over. A jar of black paint had shattered, its contents pooling like a shadow that refused to stay still. But the thing that made Ethan's heart stop was the letter on the table, folded once, neat, delicate, his name written on the front. Ethan. He reached for it with hands that suddenly felt foreign. The letter trembled as he opened it. "Ethan, I don't know how to tell you this without sounding weak. Maybe I'm weak. Maybe that's why you stopped looking at me the way you used to. I should have said something sooner. About the fear, about the messages, about the feeling that someone was watching me every time I walked home. I didn't want to burden you. You had enough darkness around your job. I didn't want to add mine. But the silence became louder, and you were drifting farther. I kept thinking it would get better, but it didn't. I'm tired, Ethan. I'm so tired. I wish you had asked me to stay. I wish I had asked you for help. See, he read the last line 4 times. Someone watching me. Messages. Fear. Ethan's pulse spiked. His training kicked in, pushing aside emotion with pure instinct. He scanned the room more carefully. The broken glass, the slashed canvas, the faint scuff near the window. He crouched. The mark on the window frame wasn't from Clara. It was from something forced open. Recently, his throat tightened. Clara didn't move out. She disappeared. And the last message she ever wrote was a cry he never heard. Ethan stood in the middle of the ruined studio, the letter shaking in his fist. Rain hammered against the window, matching the violent rhythm of his heartbeat. He had divorced his wife yesterday, and today he realized he might have just lost her forever. The apartment felt colder the longer Ethan stayed inside. Not the kind of cold that came from an open window or a malfunctioning heater, but the kind that seeped out of walls touched by fear. His fear. Clara's fear. Ethan stood in the center of her ruined studio, the unsent letter still in his hand, the ink smudged slightly from the moisture of his fingertips. He forced himself to take a slow breath. Training taught him that panic was the first enemy of clarity. But clarity didn't come. Only more questions. He pulled out his phone and snapped pictures of the slashed canvas, the broken jar, the window frame. His thumb hovered over the call button for his department, but something inside him hesitated. Clara had written about feeling watched, harassed, terrified, and he dismissed all of it. How could he now walk into the marshal's office and admit he might have walked away from an actual victim? No, not yet. He needed more before he dragged Clara's name into an official report. The living room was stripped bare, but the rest of the apartment wasn't empty, just abandoned. Art books left open, on the sofa, a half-burnt candle, her denim jacket still hanging by the door. She didn't pack. She didn't plan to leave. Ethan opened the fridge, not sure why. Inside, the light flickered on to reveal untouched groceries, eggs, fresh spinach, a carton of almond milk, all unopened, bought recently. He leaned one hand against the counter, exhaling slowly. Clara, what happened to you? His voice cracked in the empty kitchen. He moved next to her desk, a small wooden table she used for editing digital work. The laptop was missing, but the charging cable was still plugged into the wall. A thin plastic drive sat beside it. A flash drive. Ethan picked it up. It was unmarked. Clara always labeled everything. Sketches A, Portfolio 2023, reference photos. She hated clutter, chaos. But this drive was blank, hidden under an envelope, almost as if she didn't want it found casually, but wanted someone determined enough to look. He slipped the drive into his pocket. Then he noticed her phone was nowhere in sight. Clara never left without her phone. Not even for a quick grocery trip. That reality hit him harder than anything else. He walked to the bedroom, hoping for some sign she simply left in a hurry. But the bed was unmade in a way that felt frantic, not lazy. The closet door was cracked open, several clothes pulled halfway from hangers, not taken, tugged at, as if someone grabbed at them. Or she did, in fear. Ethan swallowed. He replayed the last fight they'd had, the one that pushed the divorce into motion. She had stood in this very room, her voice breaking as she said, "You don't trust me anymore, Ethan. You don't see me." He told her the distance between them was her fault, that she was hiding things, that she felt absent. The irony stung like ice. His phone buzzed suddenly. Unknown number. He lifted it to his ear. Static, then a faint, shaky breath. "Clara?" Ethan's voice sharpened. "Clara, is that you? Where are you?" The breathing stopped. A soft click. Silence. Ethan's chest tightened. The kind of silence that wasn't empty but deliberate. He dialed back. The call failed instantly. He shoved the phone into his pocket and stormed back into the studio. He scanned the slashed canvas again. The paint strokes beneath the cuts revealed something he hadn't noticed at first, a faint outline of a man's silhouette. Broad shoulders, no face, a shadow. Was Clara painting the person she believed was watching her? Someone he dismissed as imagination? His hands curled into fists. If there was even a chance she'd been telling the truth, then every day he pulled away from her was another day she carried that fear alone. He grabbed the folded letter again, reading the lines that now tore through him. I didn't want to burden you. I thought I was being paranoid. I'm tired. Ethan shut his eyes. He had always been trained to recognize signs of distress, signs of manipulation, signs of a stalker's pattern. And yet, when it came to Clara, his own wife, he dismissed everything as emotional inconsistency. He forced himself to breathe. He needed to retrace her last 48 hours. He opened her calendar app on the laptop charger. Her tablet was still on the desk. The device flickered awake with the last saved schedule. Tuesday, art session at Harbor Studio. Wednesday, therapy at 11 a.m. Thursday, no schedule. Today was Thursday. She never made it to therapy yesterday. Ethan's heartbeat faltered. He grabbed the tablet and shoved it under his arm. Then he made one last sweep of the apartment, turning off lights as he went. The walls seemed to absorb the darkness, swallowing whatever fragile life had lingered here. At the door, he paused. Clara's denim jacket still hung on the hook, its sleeves brushing lightly against the wall, as if waiting for her arm to slip through again. He touched the fabric. Cold. He whispered, I'm sorry. Then he stepped out and locked the door behind him. But the silence followed him all the way down the hallway. Something had happened to Clara, and whatever it was, it started long before the divorce papers were signed. Night settled over Seattle like a heavy coat, thick and damp, clinging to Ethan's skin as he walked toward his car. The parking lot lights buzzed with a low electric hum. Everything felt too quiet, as if the world itself was holding its breath with him. He opened the driver's door, tossed the tablet and Clara's flash drive onto the passenger seat, and sat for a long moment with his hands gripping the wheel. The ghost of her voice brushed against his memory, soft but trembling. I don't feel safe, Ethan. He had told her she was imagining things. He had told her she was stressed. He had told her everything except the one thing she needed. I believe you. Ethan turned on the ignition and pulled onto the wet street. He didn't go home. He didn't go to the station. Instead, he drove toward the only place that might still hold a piece of Clara's last steps, Harbor Studio, the shared art space she rented twice a week. The city blurred past in streaks of neon and rain. Each red light felt like an accusation. How many nights had Clara walked these same streets, glancing over her shoulder while he sat at his desk, convincing himself marriage shouldn't be this exhausting? By the time he reached Harbor Studio, the lot was nearly empty. A single security light flickered over the entrance like a failing heartbeat. Ethan stepped out of the car. The cold air bit at his jaw. Inside, the studio smelled of paint, wet clay, and stale coffee. A receptionist was closing up, stacking paperwork into a leather folder. She looked up as Ethan approached. Sorry, we're about to close. I'm Ethan Marshal, he said, flashing his badge out of habit. I'm looking for information about Clara Bennett. She was here Tuesday. Recognition softened the woman's expression. Oh, Clara. She's sweet. Quiet, but sweet. Then a frown tightened her features. We haven't seen her since. She didn't show up yesterday. That's not like her. Ethan leaned forward. Did she seem anxious? Unusual in any way? The receptionist hesitated. She was distracted, kept glancing at the door, flinching when someone walked in. I asked if she was okay, and she just smiled, but it was one of those brittle smiles. A knot twisted in Ethan's stomach. Did she mention anyone bothering her? No, but she left something in her locker. We kept it aside, thought she'd come back. The woman gestured toward a small storage hallway. You can check it. Inside the narrow corridor, the lockers hummed like metallic whispers. Clara's name was printed neatly on a small label. Ethan opened the locker. Inside was a sketchbook, 2 charcoal pencils, and a folded receipt. He grabbed the sketchbook first. When he opened it, his breath caught. Pages filled with drawings of a dark figure. Always the same shape, the same faceless void. In one sketch, the figure stood at the end of their apartment hallway. In another, it loomed behind Clara's silhouette at a bus stop. Some were frantic charcoal smudges, fingers clearly trembling. One page was different, dated 2 weeks ago. A single sentence written in the corner. He's closer now, and Ethan doesn't believe me. The shame hit him like a physical blow. He turned the page. The next drawing was a rough depiction of their bedroom, the same one he had stood in earlier. But in the window reflection, the figure was watching Clara sleep. He closed the sketchbook quickly, unable to look anymore. Then he unfolded the receipt. Raven Press Cafe, 9:14 p.m., Tuesday night. The last night anyone here saw her. Ethan pocketed the sketchbook and receipt. As he stepped out of the hallway, the receptionist stopped him. Is she okay? She asked, voice tentative. Ethan didn't know what to say. He settled on the truth. I don't know, but I'm going to find her. Outside, the rain had intensified. Wind lashed across his face as he hurried to his car. He wiped the moisture from the tablet screen and powered it on again. Clara's calendar synced with her notes app, mostly grocery lists, color palettes, and reminders. But one note caught his eye. If something happens to me... His chest tightened. He opened it. If something happens to me, it won't be random. It won't be an accident. Someone knows where I go. Someone knows when Ethan works late. I've seen him too many times to ignore it. I don't know what he wants yet, but I know he won't stop. Ethan squeezed the tablet until his knuckles whitened. Clara hadn't been paranoid. She had been hunted. He opened the flash drive next, plugging it into the tablet with an adapter. A folder popped up. 1 video file, 2 images, and an audio clip. His pulse thudded as he tapped the audio first. Static. Then Clara's voice, shaken, whispering, Ethan, I think he followed me again today. The man in the gray coat. I don't know if I'm imagining it anymore. If you ever hear this, please don't be angry. I just didn't know how to tell you without sounding crazy. A soft sob. I'm scared. The recording ended abruptly. Ethan sat still, his breath fogging up the inside of the windshield. He stared out into the rain, feeling an unfamiliar weight crush his ribcage. He had failed her. But failure wasn't the end, not this time. Ethan started the engine, wiping the fogged glass with his sleeve. Next stop, Raven Press Cafe. He would retrace every step she took, even if it meant walking straight into the darkness she had been trying to warn him about. Raven Press Cafe sat on a corner beneath a row of overgrown maples, their wet branches scraping against the awning as if whispering secrets to the night. The place was usually warm and golden through its wide windows, but at this late hour, only a few dim pendant lights remained lit. The rest of the cafe sank in soft shadows. Ethan parked across the street, letting the engine run for a moment. His fingers drummed against the steering wheel. Her receipt said 9:14 p.m., Tuesday. He stared at that time as if it were an exact moment he could rewind to, step into, and pull her back before everything collapsed. He crossed the street. A bell chimed as he opened the door. The barista, young, silver hair tied into a low knot, fleece jacket zipped to her chin, glanced up from wiping tables. We're closing soon, she said. I just have a few questions, Ethan replied, pulling out his badge. About someone who was here Tuesday night. Clara Bennett. Recognition flickered in her eyes immediately. Oh, yeah, I remember her. She comes in all the time. Or she used to. Ethan nodded. You saw her Tuesday? The barista chewed her lip before answering. Yeah, she was here late. Sat in the corner booth. Didn't order much, just tea. Kept checking her phone, looking out the window. A pause. Honestly, she looked scared. A weighted silence spread between them. Did you see her leave? Ethan asked. The barista hesitated. I did, but she didn't leave alone. Ethan felt the floor tilt under him. Describe him. Tall, gray coat, hood up. He waited outside the whole time, just stood under the street lamp. Not moving, not looking at anything. Kind of creepy. When she walked out, she slowed down like she didn't want to go near him, but he stepped toward her, said something. She froze. Ethan's pulse thudded painfully. What happened next? She nodded at him, like reluctantly, and they walked off in the same direction. Not together, but she wasn't acting like she had a choice. Ethan's jaw clenched. Do you have cameras? The barista pointed to an old security unit mounted near the register. Only inside, nothing outside, but I can show you the footage before. We shut down. Inside footage was better than nothing. She led him behind the counter and pulled up the Tuesday log. The timestamp ticked down as she scrolled, stopping at 9:11 p.m. Clara entered the cafe, dripping from the rain, clutching her jacket tight around her. She kept turning her head, glancing toward the door. Ethan's stomach twisted, watching her anxiety. She sat in the corner booth. 3 minutes passed. She checked her phone repeatedly. Then, at 9:27 p.m., her head snapped up suddenly, eyes widening. She saw something, or someone, outside. The camera couldn't catch the street, but her reaction said enough. A minute later, she stood, gathered her things, and hurried out the door. The barista looked at Ethan. That's all I saw. But Ethan wasn't done. Can I get a copy of this footage? Sure. I'll email it to you. He left his card and stepped back out into the rain-thick air. He replayed the barista's words in his head. Tall, gray coat, didn't move, said something to her. She froze. Every detail aligned with Clara's sketches, with her whispered recording, with the fear in her letter. And Ethan's denial echoed louder and louder. He walked toward the street lamp where the barista said the man stood. The sidewalk glistened under the flickering light. Cars rushed by, kicking up mist. The lamp overhead buzzed softly. He scanned the ground. Nothing unusual, just cigarette butts, wet leaves. Then something caught his eye. A fragment of paper, stuck to the pole by rain. He peeled it off gently. It was a torn piece of sketchbook paper, Clara's style unmistakable. Charcoal shading smudged by water. A partial drawing, her own hand reaching out toward something, or someone. The page was ripped violently, jagged along one side. This wasn't trash. This was dropped, or pulled. Ethan slipped the fragment into his jacket. He stood under the street lamp, staring down the direction Clara had walked with the unknown man. Southbound, toward the water. The night's cold breath pressed against his neck. Seattle's waterfront was a maze of warehouses, empty docks, and rusted industrial yards. The kind of place shadowy figures disappeared into. The kind of place a terrified woman wouldn't willingly walk toward. Ethan's phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. His blood chilled. One sentence. Stop looking for her. Another buzz. A second message. You didn't care before. Don't start now. Ethan inhaled sharply, thumb hovering over the call button. But before he pressed it, a third message arrived. A photo. His heart stopped. It was the slashed canvas from Clara's studio, taken before he arrived. The lighting was different. The angle too far from the door, taken by someone who was there, watching. Ethan closed his eyes, a storm breaking inside him. Whoever was stalking Clara was now stalking him too, and the game had already begun. The drive back to his apartment felt like a long corridor of headlights and blurred rain. Every red light seemed to linger a second too long, each one giving Ethan just enough time to drown in another wave of guilt. His phone lay on the seat beside him, silent now, as if whoever sent those messages had made their point. Stop looking for her. You didn't care before. He tightened his grip on the wheel until his knuckles bleached white. He cared now. Too late, maybe, but he cared. He pulled into his parking garage and killed the engine. The shadows between the concrete pillars felt deeper tonight, as if they were watching him. He scanned the space out of reflex, training, survival. He saw nothing unusual, but the silence hummed with unease. Inside his apartment, the lights flickered on to reveal the stillness of a place lived in but not inhabited. His jacket hit the back of a chair. He tossed Clara's tablet and the flash drive onto the coffee table, then sat on the couch with his elbows on his knees. He replayed every clue. The slashed canvas. The sketchbook filled with faceless shadows. Clara's note, "If something happens to me," her terrified voice in the audio clip. The man in the gray coat. The photo someone took inside her studio. The text messages. Pieces of a puzzle he never tried to solve until now. He clicked on the flash drive again, opening the folder labeled only with a date. Inside, a single video file waited. Ethan hesitated, then pressed play. The video opened with shaky camera work. Clara's breathing was audible, unsteady, as the image stabilized. She was filming herself in her studio, maybe weeks before she vanished. Her hair was tied loosely, eyes swollen from lack of sleep. "Ethan, if you're watching this, it means things got worse." He leaned forward, heart pounding. "I don't know who he is, but he's been following me for months. At first I thought it was coincidence, then I thought it was my anxiety." Her voice cracked. "I told you once, remember? And you said I was overreacting." Ethan's jaw clenched. Clara swallowed, eyes darting off camera. "I tried to believe I was imagining it. I really did. I didn't want you to see me as someone falling apart, but he was there again today, outside the cafe, and I think he knows I'm recording this." She paused, shoulders trembling. "Ethan, if anything happens..." A loud thud echoed in the background. Clara jerked, the camera slipping in her hand. She whispered something the microphone barely caught. "He's here." The screen went black. Ethan's blood iced. He sat frozen until the screen dimmed, reflecting his haunted expression back at him. His breathing was shallow, the air thick with dread he couldn't swallow down. Someone had been in her apartment before. Someone had been there more than once. And that someone had watched Clara break, piece by piece. Ethan stood abruptly, pacing the room. The walls felt too close. The past felt too loud. He pressed his hands to his eyes and spoke into the silence. "Clara, why didn't you tell me everything?" But he already knew the answer, because he never listened. A knock sounded at his door. Sharp, firm, measured. Ethan froze, his training firing through him instantly. He moved silently to the side of the entryway, out of direct view, and peered through the peephole. A woman, late 20s, red hair tied in a low braid, dark green raincoat soaked at the shoulders. She looked nervous but determined. He opened the door. Her eyes met his, tired, guarded. "Are you Ethan Marshall?" she asked. He straightened. "Who's asking?" "My name is Marissa Hale." She swallowed hard. I'm Clara's therapist." Ethan stiffened. "Clara never mentioned you." Marissa's voice softened. She asked me, no, begged me not to tell you. She didn't want you to think she was broken. A fierce ache twisted inside him. Why are you here? Ethan asked. Marissa took a shaky breath. Because Clara didn't show up for her last 2 sessions, and because she reached into her bag and pulled out a small envelope. She left this for me weeks ago. She said I should give it to you only if she disappeared. Ethan's stomach dropped. He took the envelope with trembling fingers. Marissa hesitated, then whispered, Ethan, whatever Clara was running from, it wasn't imaginary. Someone was tormenting her, and I think he's been watching both of you for a long time. The hallway seemed to tilt around him. He looked at the envelope, his name written in Clara's handwriting, a soft, fragile scrawl, like she wrote it while shaking. He opened it slowly. Inside was a single sheet of paper, a drawing of Clara, standing alone, with a tall, faceless figure behind her, its hand almost touching her shoulder. At the bottom, Clara had written, "He's not after me anymore. He's after both of us." Ethan looked up, breathless. Marissa, what do you know about him? Marissa met his eyes with a fear that seemed to hollow her out. Enough to know this won't end unless you find him first. Thunder rolled outside as Ethan's grip tightened around the drawing. The shadows had names, faces, histories, and he was done being blind. The rain had finally stopped, but a heavy mist clung to the city like a veil, softening streetlights into blurry orbs. Ethan stood in the doorway long after Marissa left, Clara's drawing still in his hand. The paper trembled, not from the draft sweeping through the hall, but from the way his fingers shook. He's after both of us. Clara hadn't exaggerated. She had warned him. She had tried, and he had dismissed everything. Ethan shut the door slowly, the lock clicking like a quiet accusation. He moved back to the living room, the envelope tucked under his arm. The apartment felt too small again, too filled with the ghosts of things unsaid. Marissa Hale, Clara's therapist. Why hadn't Clara told him? She was seeing someone? Why would she hide that? He knew the answer before he finished asking it. Because she didn't think he'd understand. Because she thought he'd see therapy as weakness. Because he'd made her feel she had to be fine. Ethan ran a hand down his face, exhaustion pulling at him like an undertow. But he couldn't rest. Not when every clue was a thread in a web around Clara. He opened his laptop and typed quickly. Gray Coat Assault Seattle, Art Stalker Seattle, Artist Harassment Police Reports, Raven Press Cafe Incidents. Nothing useful. Too broad, too late. He leaned back, rubbing his temples, trying to piece things together. The man in the gray coat wasn't random. Clara's fear wasn't sudden. The sketches showed months of sightings. This person wasn't opportunistic. He was methodical, deliberate, patient, and obsessed. Ethan took out the sketchbook again and flipped through the pages slowly. The figure appeared again and again, always looming, always near, bent slightly, head down as if studying Clara, memorizing her. Then he noticed something he'd missed before. In every drawing, the figure wore a long coat with a tear on the right sleeve, just above the wrist, a jagged, distinct gash. Details like that mattered. Stalkers left patterns, even unintentionally. He pulled up the cafe footage the barista emailed, Clara entering, trembling, scanning the windows. He paused at the moment she froze. Her eyes widened, fixed on something outside. Someone. Ethan zoomed in on the glass behind her. The reflection was faint, warped by raindrops on the surface, but a silhouette stood under the street lamp. Tall, hood up, arms slightly bent, and if he squinted, a tear on the sleeve. Ethan's breath hitched. This was the same man Clara had been drawing, the same figure haunting every page, real, not imagined. He played the footage again, slower. Every movement Clara made was drenched in fear. At one point, she took out her phone and typed something. Ethan paused. What had she been writing? He grabbed her tablet from the coffee table and pulled up her messages app. He scrolled through her last threads, eyes skimming past conversations with friends, art clients, her mother. Then he saw an unsent message draft, his name at the top. He tapped it open. The message was typed, but never sent. He's here. Outside, please come. I'm scared to leave alone. Timestamp. Tuesday, 9:23 p.m. 11 minutes before she walked out of the cafe. Ethan's chest constricted painfully. She had reached for him, and then changed her mind. Or ran out of time. He closed his eyes, jaw tightening until it hurt. Clara, I'm so sorry. He stood abruptly and grabbed his jacket. He needed answers, not memories. His first stop, the alley behind Raven Press Cafe. He drove in silence, the empty streets rolling by like a dark river. When he arrived, the alley was quiet except for a distant humming refrigerator unit and a dripping gutter pipe. The faint smell of coffee grounds mixed with damp brick. He walked slowly, flashlight in hand, scanning the ground. Dark puddles reflected the beam like black glass. Halfway down the alley, he saw something. A scuff mark. Fresh. Boot tread dragged sideways, like someone being pulled, or resisting. Nearby, caught between two paving stones, was a small piece of cloth. He crouched and picked it up. Gray fabric, but not from clothing. This was thicker, rougher, industrial, like canvas or a bag. He pocketed it and kept searching. A sudden metallic clang snapped through the darkness. Ethan spun around, hand drifting instinctively toward where his service weapon would have been, if he'd had the sense to bring it. But he was technically off duty and unarmed. Another sound, a slow scrape, as if someone stepped out of shadow just far enough for him to hear it, but not see it. Clara, he called out. Stupid, but human. No answer. Only the thick hush of the alley tightening around him. He took one step forward, and the street lamp at the end of the alley suddenly flickered. Once, twice, then died. Darkness swallowed him whole. Ethan held his breath. In the silence, a whisper broke the air. Low, close. Marshal. Every muscle in Ethan's body locked. The voice was unfamiliar, soft, almost amused. You should have believed her. Something rustled ahead, footsteps retreating. Ethan lunged toward the sound, but he collided with nothing but cold, empty air. The footsteps faded quickly, slipping into the maze of streets like smoke. He chased. He turned corners. He scanned every doorway, every shadow, but the man was gone. Only the whisper lingered, clinging to the night. You should have believed her. Ethan stood in the middle of the deserted street, chest rising and falling with sharp breaths, the truth slamming into him harder than any physical blow. This wasn't a random stalker. This wasn't a coincidence. This man knew Ethan, knew Clara, knew their marriage, knew the exact wound to press. And he wasn't afraid. He was playing. Ethan looked down at the gray cloth in his hand, and for the first time, he felt something colder than fear. The certainty that the man in the gray coat wasn't just stalking Clara. He was leading Ethan somewhere, step by step, like a hunt. The city felt different at dawn, quieter, softer, as if hiding the things it didn't want daylight to see. But Ethan hadn't slept, not a minute. He sat in his living room, elbows on his knees, staring at the gray cloth scrap he'd found in the alley. The whisper still echoed in his skull. You should have believed her. A taunt, a truth, a wound. The sun hadn't risen fully, just smearing the edge of the blinds with pale, indifferent light. Ethan rubbed his gritty eyes, stood stiffly, and grabbed Clara's tablet again. There were more files on the flash drive he hadn't opened. 2 images. He tapped the first one, a blurry photo of Clara entering her apartment building at night. The angle was low, taken from far away, like the photographer had been hiding behind a parked car. Clara looked over her shoulder in the picture, mid-step, hair falling forward. She looked frightened, lost. The timestamp, 3 weeks ago, long before the divorce, long before he bothered to notice she was unraveling. Ethan swallowed hard and opened the second image. This one froze him. It was Clara sitting in a cafe, not Raven Press, a different place. Her hair was pulled back, her shoulders tense, her hands wrapped around a cup of tea. She was staring at something outside the frame. Something, or someone. In the reflection on the cafe window, the faintest outline appeared. A hood. A broad shape. A silhouette too familiar now. Ethan exhaled slowly, as if the air itself burned. He grabbed his coat and left the apartment. The day had barely begun, but his pulse was already thrumming with an urgency that bordered on desperation. There was one clue he hadn't explored: the therapy retreat cabin Clara used to visit. Marissa had mentioned it briefly during their conversation, but avoided details, insisting it was complicated. Ethan didn't care. If Clara had gone there, if the man in the gray coat followed her, he needed to see it. He dialed Marissa's number. She answered on the second ring, voice thick with exhaustion. "Ethan? I need the address of the retreat cabin Clara visited," he said. "All of them, if there were more." Silence stretched on the line. "Ethan, that place wasn't official therapy. It was somewhere she went to feel safe. Somewhere from her past." "I don't care what it was," Ethan said. "I need the address." Marissa hesitated, then sighed. "I'll text it to you, but be careful. Clara said she only went there when she was overwhelmed. If she ended up there during all this, she might not have been alone." The dread in her voice sharpened his focus. Minutes later, the address appeared: Ridgewood Cabin 4C, North Bend, WA. A remote area, forested, thinly populated. He drove. The highway unspooled under his wheels, gray and endless. Forests thickened as he left the city behind. Pines rose tall and dark on either side, their branches shivering in the early wind. The world outside looked like the kind of place someone could vanish in without leaving even a whisper behind. The gravel road to the cabins cracked under the tires. When Ethan pulled up, the air was still, almost too still, like the trees were waiting. Cabin 4C stood tucked beneath towering pines, its wood siding weathered, its small porch sagging. A place forgotten long before Clara sought refuge here. Ethan stepped out, scanning the perimeter. Birds scattered at his approach, rustling the underbrush. He tried the door. It creaked open. Inside, the air smelled faintly of turpentine and damp wood. Clara's presence lingered, subtle, like a ghost that hadn't fully learned how to leave. A scarf hung on a chair. A coffee mug sat half full on the counter, mold forming along the rim. She had been here. Recently. Ethan's pulse quickened. He walked deeper into the cabin. The living space was cluttered with canvases, some blank, others scratched with unfinished images. But on the far wall, taped unevenly, was a series of Clara's quick charcoal sketches. Every sketch was the same man, tall, hooded, faceless. In one drawing, he stood at the edge of the cabin clearing. In another, closer, right outside the porch. And in the last one, his hand was pressed against the cabin window. Ethan's stomach turned. Clara had been drawing him even here, where she thought she was safe. He moved toward a small table in the corner. A notebook lay open, pages ruffled. He lifted it carefully. Clara's handwriting filled the last page, the edges smudged. "He followed me here, I saw him at the tree line. I saw him again at the creek. I can't breathe. I can't think. Why won't Ethan believe me? Pain carved through him. He turned the page. The next entry was shorter. I hear footsteps at night, soft, like he's circling the cabin. I think he wants me to be alone. His vision blurred. A sound cut through the silence. Not inside the cabin, just outside. Leaves crunching. One step. Another. Slow. Purposeful. Ethan froze. Every muscle coiled. He moved to the window, staying low, peering into the tree line. At first he saw nothing. Just pine shadows swaying. Then, a figure emerged from behind a tree. Tall, gray coat, hood up. Ethan's heart slammed against his ribs. The man didn't move toward the cabin. He stood still, watching, as if waiting for Ethan to understand something. Then the man lifted his hand. Not a wave, not a threat. He gestured, a single, deliberate motion. Follow. Ethan stepped back from the window, adrenaline surging. This wasn't random. This wasn't coincidence. The man wanted Ethan to see something, to join something. And Clara, somewhere, was at the center of whatever that was. Ethan took one last look at the sketches on the wall. Then he opened the cabin door. The cold air hit him like a warning. But he walked toward the tree line anyway. Because the man in the gray coat had stopped hiding, and Ethan was finally ready to stop running. The forest absorbed sound like a confession. It swallowed everything Ethan tried to hear. His footsteps, the pounding of his own pulse, even the breath he forced himself to steady. The mist clung to his jacket. Pine needles crackled beneath his boots. Ahead of him, the man in the gray coat walked without hurry, as if he knew Ethan would follow no matter what. The trees thickened, the light dimmed, the world narrowed to a tunnel of dark green. Ethan kept his distance, 10 yards behind, but the man never looked back. He simply moved forward, deliberate, almost graceful in the way shadows flowed around him. After what felt like 20 minutes, the forest opened into a small clearing. A cabin Ethan hadn't seen on any map stood there, abandoned, sunken slightly into the ground, its windows cracked, roof dented by storms and time. No smoke, no movement, no sign of life. The man in the gray coat finally stopped and turned. Ethan felt his breath freeze in his throat. The hood hid most of his face, but the jawline was visible, sharp, too thin. A face starved of something: sleep, sanity, reason. "Where is she?" Ethan said, voice low. The man tilted his head, just the slightest angle, as if studying him. "You came alone," the man murmured. His voice was softer than Ethan expected, almost delicate. "Good." Ethan clenched his fists. "I'm not here to play your games." A faint chuckle slipped from under the hood. "But you've been playing them for months. You just didn't know the rules." Ethan took a step forward. "Where is Clara?" The man lifted a hand and pointed to the cabin behind him. Ethan's heart stopped. He pushed past the man, ignoring the whisper of fabric brushing his sleeve. He reached the porch in 3 strides, grabbed the rusted doorknob, and shoved it open. The inside smelled of cold wood and dust. The air was stale. A beam of weak daylight cut across the floor, revealing scattered blankets, a tipped-over cup, and a figure curled in the corner. Clara. Ethan crossed the room so fast he barely felt his legs. He knelt in front of her. Clara lifted her head slowly, eyes unfocused. Her hair was tangled, cheeks flushed from cold, and her hands shook violently. "Ethan?" Her voice cracked like fragile glass. "Is it really you?" "I'm here," he whispered, pulling his jacket off and wrapping it gently around her shoulders. "I found you." Her body trembled against him. Not from fear now, but from the sudden collapse of it. She clutched his shirt weakly. "I tried to call you," she whispered, "but he wouldn't let me leave." Ethan swallowed hard. "He's not going to hurt you again." She closed her eyes, tears slipping silently down her face. Behind them, the door creaked softly. Ethan turned. The man in the gray coat stood there, framed by the doorway, as if he belonged to the darkness around him. Clara flinched. Ethan straightened, stepping protectively between them. "Don't take another step," Ethan warned. The man said nothing. His chest rose and fell beneath the heavy coat, but he remained perfectly still. Ethan's voice hardened. "Who are you? What do you want from her?" A long pause, and then the man spoke, words quiet but heavy. "She wasn't supposed to choose you." Ethan blinked. "What?" The man clutched the edge of his hood, knuckles pale. "She left. She walked away from everything I gave up for her. She walked away and ran to you." Clara's breath hitched behind Ethan. "No," she whispered. "No, that's not true." "You forgot me," the man continued, voice trembling with something unstable. "You pretended I didn't exist." Ethan's mind raced. A stalker wasn't always a stranger. Sometimes obsession grew from something broken, something familiar. "Clara," Ethan murmured softly without turning. "Who is he?" Clara shook her head, speech shallow and shaking. "I don't know. I don't—" But then her voice faltered. Her eyes widened. Recognition, buried, resurfacing. "Oh, God," she whispered. Ethan felt her grip tighten on his arm. The man lowered his hood slowly. His face emerged, gaunt, hollow-cheeked, eyes too bright, too fixed on Clara. Brown hair, unkempt, a faint scar on the jaw. Clara gasped. "Lucas!" The name hit the room like a snapped wire. Ethan's stomach dropped. Clara's ex-boyfriend, the one she never spoke about, the one she broke up with years before Ethan met her, the one she said was too intense. Lucas's lips curled into something like a smile, but fractured. "She said she loved me," he murmured, eyes only on Clara. "But she replaced me. She found you. She erased me." Ethan stepped forward. "You've been terrorizing her for months. You kidnapped her." Lucas's expression shifted. No anger, no guilt, just something twisted with devotion. "I saved her," he said. "She needed someone to watch over her, someone who wouldn't abandon her when she cried." Clara's voice cracked. "You hurt me." "I protected you," Lucas snapped, the first crack of rage slicing the air. "And he—" His finger jabbed toward Ethan. "He never listened to you. He didn't deserve you." Ethan's fists tightened, but he forced his voice to stay calm. "You're done, Lucas." Lucas's face twitched. "If I can't have her, you don't get to keep her." He lunged. Ethan tackled him instantly, rage and training snapping into place. They crashed onto the floor, fists flying, wood splintering. Lucas fought with wild desperation, clawing, grabbing, snarling like something cornered. But Ethan was stronger, fueled by guilt, terror, and love. A final blow to Lucas's jaw sent him collapsing. Silence rippled through the cabin. Ethan panted, chest heaving. Clara sobbed behind him. Police would later say Lucas had been unraveling for years. Obsession twisting into delusion, delusion into fixation. Clara had been unlucky. Ethan had been blind. But now... Ethan turned back to Clara. She stared at him with trembling eyes, fear and relief tangled together. He knelt beside her. "You're safe now," he whispered. Clara leaned into him, the weight of everything finally sinking. "Ethan, what happens now?" He wrapped his arms around her, grounding himself. "I don't know," he said honestly, But whatever happens, I'm here. This time, I'm listening. Outside, dawn finally broke, weak but real, spilling a soft gold across the ruined cabin. And for the first time in months, Clara let herself breathe. A beginning or an ending, they weren't sure. But the truth was no longer a shadow between them, and that was enough.